Before we get started with today's podcast, we'd like to ask returning listeners to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you really enjoy it, share a link to this podcast with friends or family who would enjoy hearing our weekly discussions about basketball and basketball culture. Now, on to the show.
Isn't it amazing when Michigan can keep this game to a 19-foot, 9-inch game inside that three-point line? It's all there. Nice move by Steve Fisher here. Turn it into the 19-9.
Welcome to the 99 Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Barnett, and today I am here with a couple special guests, one of which is being my dad, Gary Barnett. Gary Bear, how are you doing?
You're doing great. Ready to go.
You got your mic and headphones figured out over there?
After a lot of work, yeah.
And then I have my brother-in-law, Dave Wilkinson, with us. What's up, Dave?
Josh, I'm excited to be back for my second podcast. Thank you.
We did this last night. We were on was it 2 nights ago?
2 nights ago.
2 nights ago. We are on a family vacation here for the New Year's, and we are all trapped in the house with about 72 kids running around that you might hear here in a little bit.
That's also why the microphones smell like cigars.
You have to tilt your microphone up to your lips. There you go. It's a top loader. There it is. Now
Okay.
you got it. Yep. Just schooling Dad here through how this podcast works, but we're actually doing this, like I said, late December, heading into New Year's. But this is going to be a podcast that will actually air later on in 2021, hopefully around March Madness, assuming that we have March Madness, which I think we will. And this is in conjunction with our Slam Top 50 magazine that I was a contributor in and had rankings, but I only had rankings because of the research that my dad did. So I wanted to have him on the podcast to discuss our top 50s, discuss his list versus my list, some of the stuff that he came up with as he was researching and doing it, because the one perspective that he has that I don't is he saw most of these teams. He's old as shit. So that was an advantage in ranking these. You don't have a rebuttal for that?
Yeah, I'll just say the first one I remember seeing was the great win by Texas Western over Kentucky.
So that was 66, right?
66. It was black and white. And I'll never forget it because after that game, my dad came home that night and told me that the game of basketball had just been forever changed with that win.
Yeah, forever changed for the good.
Yes.
But we'll get into that. We'll get into Texas Western. We'll get into our top 10s, because I actually do have Texas Western in the top 10s. How we came up with our rankings, and we have Dave here to provide color commentary. He's about 8 beams and coke in, so we are looking forward to what he has to say. So getting into it, tell us a little bit about the binder, Dad. So when Slam and Dennis Page, my guy Dennis Page, and PRC Peter Robert Casey pitched this idea, I was super excited. I called you right away. And I told you, like, hey, I like lifelong dream bucket list thing. I get to contribute to a Slam magazine, which Mom had bought me subscriptions to since I was maybe 12, 13 years old when they first came out. I'll never forget, she got me, I've told this on the podcast before, but she got me the Sean Kemp second issue ever for a drive actually down to Florida, which is where we're at now. And I read that thing front to back, and then from then on, she just got it for me for the car ride, and from then on, I've been an avid Slam subscriber. So this was like a big deal. So I called Dad right away, and I was super pumped. And then, as Dave can see, sitting across from us is a binder that he dropped off down at HQ.
That thing looks like something I had maybe in 3rd grade, 4th grade, of just all handwritten notes. There's 30 to 40 hours of research put in there, and Gary just put that out of his head. He didn't have to go digging on the internet for that. He just knows all that stuff off the top of his head.
No, I went through a lot of old books. I went to the library. I did hit the internet a little bit and looked at some rankings that were put out years ago. So that's kind of how I did it.
So the most interesting part of what you just said there is that you hit the internet. I go over to this dude's house like twice a week to fix internet issues and
televisions,
help him with email and televisions and stuff. But the fact that he wrote this all into a binder, and I will take some pictures of this thing and get it posted to our social media account. But when he dropped this off, I'm flipping through it in amazement, and everybody that else is seeing it is looking at it in amazement. And then it dawns on me, and I look at everybody, and I'm like, why didn't this motherfucker just type that stuff? Like, if he types it, I can just pull right, copy and paste.
Well, I can tell you he's really unsure on picks 22 through 30 because there's a lot of whiteout. There's a lot of whiteout on there written over it.
Like,
So
who uses whiteout anymore?
if we get down that far, he's going to be having
my
trouble
helps.
describing his pick.
Whiteout does not work on a computer.
Yeah, all joking aside, I really appreciate the help. The binder was amazing. My task was to come up with 80 teams to send out to our analysts, so everybody could then like plug teams in where they thought they belonged into the top 50, and that's how we kind of compiled our list. Now, again, we're kind of doing this blind because we don't have the Slam Top 50 issue in front of us. We don't know how it turns out because it's a lot of different votes that are going to be compiled, but I didn't really give a shit. I just wanted to do this with Dad and Dave and have some fun with it. So here we go. Quick disclaimer. Dad didn't know that we could pick teams that didn't win a national championship. So his list is a little bit different because it involves only national championship winning teams. My list varies a little bit because it does. We're not going to bore you and go 1 through 50, but we will talk about a few different things on this list that we thought were kind of fun. It's an impossible task, though, right? Like, it's impossible to rank eras. It's impossible to compare teams, especially some of like Bill Russell's teams that played in the 60s as opposed to, the 2015 Kentucky team and so on and so forth. That's just an impossible task, but we had a lot of fun doing it. So let's kind of get into it, and we'll start with our homer pick because we both had the number one. Our number one teams were the same. Dad, go ahead.
1976, Indiana Hoosiers, 32-0. Great team. 4 out of their 5 people that they played in the tournament were ranked in the top 9, and they pretty much manhandled everybody throughout, including Marquette, UCLA, who they beat the first game of the year, which I was in attendance at over in St. Louis at the old Checker Dome. So you cannot get any better than the Indiana Hoosiers of 76 unless you ask Bob Knight. He'll tell you they were better in 75.
So that was where I was going to follow up. Was that team better? Was the 75 team better in your mind than 76?
Well, you got to go with who won a championship. The champs were 76, and 75 got beat by Kentucky without Scott May healthy in the regional finals.
So the thing that's most interesting to me about 75, and a thing that we all got cheated out of, I think, and obviously this is several years before I'm born, but I didn't notice it, or I didn't realize it until much later that 75 UCLA won, correct? So they beat Kentucky in the national championship. But that was Wooden's last year and last championship, correct?
That's correct.
So what would have been poetic would have been the passing of the torch from Wooden, the great of the game of his era, coach of the game of his era, to the new up-and-coming general, Bob Knight, who would have took it. And
Bob Knight might have thrown it right back at Wooden.
Well, yeah, but, I mean, I know that he's not a big Coach Wooden fan, but that's besides the point.
I don't think Wooden liked him too much either.
Well, yeah, but whatever. I think it would have been cool to see that kind of passing of the torch because you don't get that very often, in any sport, that you get the young buck, the up-and-coming guy taking the throne from the established guy and winning a national championship. And that would have given IU back-to-back undefeated national championships, right?
That's
correct.
Won
those 2 games? All right, so where did you go from there? So, I know that it's tough because you could rank – this is where, I got really caught up in – we didn't want to be repetitive in our list, so there's part of that. Because you could really go UCLA, all 3 of Alcindor's national championships.
Right.
And then Walton won 2 championships, and you could probably sprinkle them in, but we didn't want to get repetitive. So where did you put the best of Alcindor's teams and the best of Walton's teams?
Okay, the best of Lou Alcindor's was 1968, and they were 29-1. And that included the big game at at Houston's Astrodome. And then as far as Walton's team, I had them ranked second, and that was the 1972 team because even though both those teams were undefeated, 72 and 73, the 72 team had a wider margin of victory, and they played a tougher tournament schedule than the 73, in my opinion.
So where did you have 68 then?
68 was ranked fourth.
Okay, so that was what my list was too.
Okay.
I had 72 UCLA at second, and then I had 68 UCLA at fourth. But I only had them there probably because that's where you ranked them, and I just like on those teams before me, I just kind of defaulted to you.
And if there's UCLA fans out there, they'll come in and say, well, what about 67?
Well, if there's
what about
UCLA
69?
fans out there, they need to start showing up to the fucking games because Poly Pavilion looks like nobody's there. Well, nobody's there for anybody now.
Yeah.
Where did you have Russell? I thought that was interesting too because he was 55 and 56.
55 and 56. I had the 56 team ranked number 11. Bill Russell was phenomenal. Basically, there were two rule changes because of the Bill Russell dominant force and defense as far as offensive goaltending, and then they widened the lane for him and outlawed offensive goaltending because of Bill Russell. A lot of people think it was Chamberlain, but it was Russell if you go back and research it. They were phenomenal.
But in the landscape of college basketball, has there been a player as dominant as Bill Russell, not exclude the team, in a 1 or 2 season stretch as he was? I mean, Gary, I have no idea, but
I would say Bill Walton was the best big man I ever saw play in college as far as everything you wanted a big man to do, he could do. I didn't see Bill Russell play until he was with the Celtics.
What about Wilt at Kansas?
Wilt,
same thing? Didn't see him to the pros?
Wilt was really good, but Wilt always had – I mean, you got to win championships, and he had difficulty doing that. And you would have thought that they would have, but they always ended up a little bit short. That IU team beat them in 54 or 55. I can't remember which.
Or 53. Was it an IU?
I think it was 54, but I don't think anybody at this table can name a player on the 54 team.
No, I think it's 53. IU
was
has
it?
a championship in 53, I think. But that was like, I'm going to try to name a player. Don Schultz. Is that a player?
Don Schultz. Schlunt. It was Schlunt. He was good. Yeah. Schlunt was good.
Yeah. Fuck, Don putting in buckets, man.
It's hard to look at.
It's impossible.
It's hard to look at those teams from the even if you go to the 60s, it's hard to look at a team in the 60s that, would dominate. But I think Alcindor's teams would still be pretty doggone good.
Here's the ultimate question for Dad. Where did you rank your first Kentucky team on your list?
All right, I'll give you my first Kentucky team on the list is number 7. That's that 2012 Kentucky team that was 38-2.
Yep.
And they were, as much as it grieves me to say it, they were really good. And I just want to thank Christian Watford for one of those losses that Kentucky had.
Let me ask Dave something. Why is Michael Kidd-Gilchrist not good in the NBA?
I have no idea.
That dude was a stud.
He was a stud.
He was.
And the cool thing about that Kentucky team was they were a real team, and they had people at every position.
Yep.
And you look at them today, and they're all 6'6", 6'7", same position.
Right.
And these guys had Teague. They had Anthony Davis.
Yep.
I mean, Davis had, and I'm going to blow the stats in the championship game, but he had 2 points.
6 points, I think.
2 points in the first half and 7 blocks.
Yeah.
But he completely dominated the championship game,
Yep.
not by scoring.
Yep.
Right.
And so Calipari, I don't think has put together a well-rounded team like that before or since.
Well,
then.
They had 5. There were 5 starters were all drafted in the first round, right?
Well, he had 2 guys that stayed back though too, because he had an awesome recruiting class that year before, and he had that Terrence dude,
Terrence Jones. Yep,
stayed back as a sophomore, and that Dorian Lamb dude.
Right.
And so there was 2 dudes that then joined, and I think that in today's one and done, and in the Duke and Kentucky model now, I think the more important in Kentucky, you're seeing that this year with Kentucky. Like as we speak right now, they're 1-6.
Yep.
But I think
too bad.
It's as I know. It's more important of who is coming back just as much as anybody's coming in, unless you have a once-in-a-generation talent like Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference, right? So
yeah,
did you have any other? Yeah,
in fact, in that title game, it was Lamb that led him in scoring. He had 22 points.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, it's in my research. Doran Lamb.
Your research also told me that Bo Kimball shot a left-handed free throw with his eyes closed.
Well, I know I was wrong on that, but I think he was squinting.
He was wrong with it all the way until I showed him the YouTube video, and then he told me, well, he squinted.
He's squinting. Give an old man a break.
Did you have any other Kentucky teams? Because I want to talk about a Kentucky team again. Did you have any other Kentucky teams, in your top 10?
No.
Okay, so where did you put the 96 Kentucky team?
The 96 Kentucky team, I have them 29th.
See,
I have the 78 Kentucky team at 25.
So Dave is just pulling some stuff up over here because he's just now doing his research, and he has what list are you looking at?
It is hold on, I think it's let's see, NCAA. I don't know what site this is, but they have that Kentucky team at number 5 overall.
So I had 2 Kentucky teams in my top 10.
Oh.
I had the 2012 at 5, which was a little bit higher. You said you had them at 7, right?
Yeah.
And then I had the 96 team at 9. And
well, they were great teams.
Loaded.
They were absolutely loaded. And you remember coming in from the offseason, the talk was that Kentucky's second 5 would be the number 2 ranked team in the country. You guys remember that?
Yep. They had 9.
No, I don't recall that.
9 NBA players on this team. And just Walker and Walter McCarty, those two, Derek Anderson, Ron Mercer, all those guys. Nazir Muhammad, Tony Delk.
And,
that team is sick. It's stupid.
Yeah.
On which team is that?
96
team.
34-2.
But they brought half of those dudes off the bench. That was what was insane. And that was Pitino's national championship year.
Yeah, and those were some.
And then he leaves, and then Tubby comes in 98 and wins with a lot of Pitino's players.
And those were some really, really loud uniforms. Those things.
Those uniforms were dope.
Wow.
And 99 hopes to bring those back as soon as possible. Yeah, I think 96 was the denim ones.
Yeah.
When they were
something else. Yep.
And I remember that being crazy, and the Converse Dr. J's that they wore with the denim in them.
Well, the thing about the 96 team, too, was the year, I think that was Pitino's second year at the school, maybe, or third.
No, because in what year?
They were pretty. They were
96.
I thought.
No, he came when they were on probation.
Right.
And then he had the game with Mashburn and the Unforgettables against Duke when Laettner hit the shot. That was 92.
Okay.
So it couldn't have been his.
Well, were they coming off of? Maybe I'm confused with the 92 team because he had a really good team within just a couple years of when he got to Kentucky, really good. And I thought it was the 96
Well, speaking of perfect segue there, Gary, speaking of 1992, where did you have the 1992 Duke Blue Devils who beat that Kentucky team?
Duke Blue Devils were ranked number 14 in my rankings.
Okay, so I slid them way up. I had them at 8.
Well,
and I'll never forget that Kentucky game because we watched it at Stan and Dana's.
Right.
And it was right after we watched IU just destroy UCLA.
It was right after you got done playing 11-year-old all-star basketball somewhere.
I probably just throw out a fake number to make it sound like I was really good. I probably had like 2 points. No, I remember that game because IU was gonna play the winner of that game,
right?
And IU just absolutely obliterated UCLA.
Who had beat them earlier that year.
I didn't know that. They just destroyed them. I actually went back and watched that game. Don McClain acted like a little bitch during that entire game, super chippy, and we just beat their ass, and it was great to watch. But I'll never forget everybody cheering at Stan and Dana's against Kentucky.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that was really before Duke was like Duke.
Right.
They had won the national championship the year before. But nobody hated Duke like they hated Kentucky.
No.
Back then, especially in Indiana.
Especially Southern
Indiana. And I'll never
forget
Sean Woods hits that running bank bullshit shot. It goes in, and everybody's like, well, I guess we're playing Kentucky. And I'll never forget Dad was sitting there and he was like, Duke is the champion. They'll play like champions. He said Duke will win this game. And everybody's like, oh, no, they won't. You just don't want to play Kentucky. He's like, Duke will win this game. And then Grant Hill hits Leitner. And like Grant Hill is a sophomore. So like that 91, and we're going to get into 91 UNLV here shortly. But the 91 team, the only thing that changed with Duke from that 90 team that got blown out by UNLV to the 91 team really was Grant Hill. Well, it also turns out that Grant Hill is pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
And then you get a sophomore Grant Hill on that 92 team, and you get peak Leitner, peak Hurley. Hurley was a junior. Leitner was a senior. You have Antonio Lang, who's young on that team. Cherokee Parks, who's young on that team. Brian Davis. You have Marty Clark. That team was really good.
Yeah, I mean, you say that nobody hated Duke then. I mean, I was number one on the Duke hating list. I've always hated Duke. But that team put together two great players, Hill and Leitner, and Hurley as well. But they had such a great team of role players that did their job. And that when you have one or two guys like that, that's all you need to really be a dominant team. They won the national championship by 20. That year, I mean, they the game. Yeah, I mean,
but
they're incredible.
I will say this: I've said it a million times on this podcast. I cannot bring myself to go back and watch the '92 IU Duke game because I remember watching that as a 12-year-old, 11-year-old, and I walked outside, and it might have been the first time I ever said "fuck." I looked at my cousin Ryan, and I said, "IU got fucked."
Absolutely, there's no doubt. If you go back and look at it, and you look at the officiating, who was the official that always screwed IU?
Valentine.
Yes.
Yeah, or Hightower.
Go back and look at it.
Yeah.
Go back and look at that, and there's just
I
no way.
The only play of that whole game that I remember, the only game, is Calbert Chaney drove baseline and went up off 2 feet and jumped back into the play and didn't hit anybody, but because he threw his body back into play, like coming from the baseline to make a layup. He literally touched nobody, and they called an offensive foul on him. And I thought we were going to burn the house down.
Oh, and then Todd Leary comes in and damn near lights the whole gym up.
Lights the whole thing up.
Unbelievable.
He does.
Yeah, unbelievable.
He went nuts at the end to bring us back. Like we were.
And if you hear I heard Leary's podcast he made a podcast about that game, and he said the only difference between Duke and Indiana that year was Valentine's officiating.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. That game,
three of our starters fouled out that game.
I've tried to bring myself back to rewatching that game probably 35 times, and I get it up on YouTube, and I cannot hit play. Like I cannot bring myself back to it.
Not that there's any sour grapes from us Indiana fans.
Well, we had that, and then we had we had May's wrist. This is going to turn into Indiana pod. We had May's wrist or hand in 75,
right?
And then we had the fucking of Duke in 92, and then we had Henderson's ACL in 93 because that 93 team was loaded.
Very good, yes.
But they got some revenge on a pretty damn good Duke team in 2002.
Yeah, that's true.
And that happened. God dang, would I trade a national championship in 92 or 93 for that 2002 run?
Well, that's when you were there, so you would do that.
Absolutely.
I think I would. I don't know if I would or not. I would now, but at the time, I'm not sure. Okay, so I have two teams that we haven't talked about inside my top 10, and I'm gonna have you talk about both of them, Dad. But I had at number 6, I had the 1974 NC State team with David Thompson.
That was a really, really good team. Let me see where I had them. North Carolina State. I have them number 9. They were 30-1, and the year before that they were undefeated.
Yes,
but apparently there were some recruiting violations or something because they weren't eligible. They weren't eligible.
Never in college basketball does that happen.
That game against UCLA. I mean, David Thompson was unbelievable, but there were some other good players on that team. A couple of them were from Indiana.
Oh, really?
Stoddard and Monty Tao, their little guard, were both from Indiana, and I could be wrong on this, I think Stoddard went on to pitch in the major leagues.
Okay.
And then they had a 7'2" guy by the name of Tom Burleson that ended up in the U.S. Congress out of Maryland.
I have heard that.
That
name.
but David Thompson was just phenomenal.
That was my follow-up.
If you haven't seen him play, go back and get that film and watch him play.
Well, it's on like an 8mm or whatever the hell they used back then. That's the problem. But where would you rank David Thompson in your all-time? You know what I mean? Like, what range would he be in all-time just college basketball players?
Well, there's so many great ones, but I mean, he would be in the top 20, top 25.
Yeah, see.
You know,
I don't think people remember that or know that though. No. Something about that 74 team or just NC State. Like everybody, when you think of NC State, you think of Valvano and you think of Wittenberg and Lorenzo Charles and beating pie slam pajama stuff. And that 74 team never gets just due. Right.
And that team that came to play for Valvano was basically recruited by Norm Sloan.
Right. So Valvano tells a hilarious story. And I've probably said it on this pod, like I've said everything, but in that Legends book that you got me, you remember that book, the Legends or whatever, the Legends Club, or I can't remember what it's
worth a read.
Called. Feinstein wrote it, I think, right? It doesn't matter.
Feinstein, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
And so Jim Valvano is talking, and he says, "I get the job at NC State," and he's like, "I go to the barber and I get my hair cut." And all you heard about was Dean Smith. Dean Smith this and Dean Smith that and all this shit. And he says, well, and so the barber's cutting his hair, and he says, "Well, Coach, I hope you do a lot better than that coach we just had." And he was like, "Well, Norm Sloan won you a national championship in 1974. The barber stopped, looked at him, and goes, "But what would Dean Smith have done with all that talent?"
Of course, Valvano probably made that up.
Oh, 100%. He was something else.
Valvano came out of Iona, and that's where Patino's at now.
Yeah.
Fighting Gales of Iona.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then the other team we were talking a little bit at the beginning about to round out my top 10. I had Texas Western in 66.
I had
and it was
number
hard
8.
I think I probably gave them extra points for the implications of the game, what the game meant, socially and in society at the time too. Bumping it up a little bit, but the movie Glory Road, which I'm sure most of our listeners have watched based off of that run, but and we have a poster of them hanging up down at HQ too, and that game happened at Cole Fieldhouse, which is like one of my favorite venues of all time too.
Well, I think the tournaments back then when they played them at those, I guess, smaller venues, the places just rocked.
Yeah, they didn't play them at smaller venues. They might have been smaller, but they played them at places that were built for basketball, which is what they have to do now. Yep. And so we were talking about this. Dave and I were talking about this. Not to go off on a tangent away from the 66 team, but what if they do this March Madness in Indy, but they're using Hinkle, they're using Banker's Life, they're using, they'll obviously use
they're talking
Oil.
They're talking about using Mackey Arena at Purdue.
But
that's a great venue.
It is a great venue. But if they go anywhere near 50% capacity and they put it in those venues, it's really going to be hard for fans to come off of that. Like, that's going to be dope.
Right. I mean, if you play an NCAA tournament game at Hinkle Fieldhouse, I cannot imagine a better venue than that to play an NCAA tournament game. I mean, that place is
the GOAT.
It's a mecca of college basketball. It's gorgeous.
Back in the day, I remember going there for Indiana High School basketball state finals, and the place actually shook. And now they've reconfigured some of it. It was old wooden bleachers back then.
I know that you have to renovate to keep up with the Joneses, but the renovation, I felt like Hinkle lost a little bit in the renovation personally.
Yeah, but it's still got wood bleachers all the way up the middle in the 300 level. I mean, it's still unlike any other place.
The only renovation I liked at Hinkle was they now sell beer.
Yeah, I mean, you can get Upland beer anywhere in that place. It's fantastic.
Quick shout out to Derek Cole, who's one of our listeners and followers on Twitter, big Butler fan, and he went around to all the dumpsters and grabbed me about 3 bleachers from the old Hinkle that I now have in HQ. So if you guys want any, hit him up, listeners. Just kidding, Derek. I don't mean to send people your way. So just real quick, Dad, go through your list again. Just rank them 1 through 10. And
Top
then
10. All right. Number 1, 76 Indiana. Number 2, 72 UCLA, followed by 73 UCLA, followed by 68 UCLA, followed. Oh, here's the team we haven't talked about. 1982 North Carolina Tar Heels.
I just saw that too.
Then number 6, UCLA in 67. I've already mentioned Kentucky is number 7, 2012. Number 8 is Texas Western. Number 9, North Carolina State with David Thompson. And number 10 was 1969 UCLA. So there's 5 of my top 10, but I don't see how you can keep them out.
Yeah, the UCLA thing, that's a tricky thing. Let's go back to the 82 North Carolina Tar Heels that went 32-2 and beat Georgetown on a young Mike Jordan jumper from the left wing in the Superdome, which 5 years later we had number 23 Keith Smart from the left side in the Superdome hit a game-winning jumper for the Indiana Hoosiers. My all-time favorite team, 87. But 82 team, did the 82 team for you get a bump because Jordan became what Jordan became?
Maybe because, when you asked me to look at this, I looked only at the NCAA championship teams, but I thought the 84 North Carolina team was better than the 82.
And that's the team that the Hoosiers beat.
Right. Yep. With Alford and Dan Dockage.
Tell the Dan Dockage story, Dan.
Yeah, supposedly guarding Jordan.
Yeah, but tell him what happened when Knight came in and told him that he was guarding Jordan.
But I thought the 84 team was better than the 82.
So the story is that Dockage went and threw up after he found out that he was guarding Jordan before the game. And now Dockage hangs his hat on the fact that he was the only guy that could shut down. Him and Dean Smith were the only guys that could hold Jordan under 20 points,
right.
Which is great.
Well, that explains all the whiteout on your paper, Gary, that you only ranked national champions.
Yeah.
And
I missed one, so I had to go back and white out a few.
When you walk into Knicks, they have that great picture of I think it's a Sports Illustrated cover with Jordan, and Dockage scribbles on there something about I'm the only guy that can guard Michael Jordan or something.
Yeah.
But the thing about, Worthy obviously was on the 82 team, but who never gets any run for being on that 82 team is Sam Perkins.
Oh my God.
The Big Smooth.
He was so phenomenal for so many years in the NBA with the Pacers. That guy was great. One of my all-time favorite players.
I liked him too.
You only liked him because he looked like he was high every game and had the big long dreads and
I couldn't
sit out there sleeping and just drain them left-handed threes.
Man, he could shoot.
He could shoot it with
eyes closed.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I think the 82 team has some dope uniforms too. But I had them as my number 3 team all time, but that is a big time Jordan boost just because the GOAT's on there. And I know he's just a freshman, but
and they beat Patrick Ewing. Don't forget that.
Yeah, I think Ewing goaltended the first 4 shots or something.
Right.
Yeah. And but think about that Georgetown run though while we're on Georgetown. So you had the 82, and then in 80, they won it in 84.
Right. No, I had that.
So they played in the national championship in 82. I don't know what they did in 83, but then in 84 they won the national championship, and in 85 they get upset by Villanova. They should have won another national championship. That's a hell of a run.
That was what I had down as one of my historic games was the Villanova defeat of Georgetown because it was cataclysmic in college basketball.
And people thought it was an April Fool's joke.
Yeah.
Because it happened on April 1st.
They just shot lights out. I watched that game. It's like, when's Georgetown going to come out of this?
82% or something from the field, something crazy.
Yeah.
And that was pre-shot clock era too, right? And,
yep.
Yeah. Crazy. So the big question is, and this is where Dave can come in too, because he's already been running his mouth about UNLV.
Hasn't been mentioned yet.
But that UNLV team. So this is where I get in arguments. The 90 team won it, right? I don't even have the 90 team in my top 50, but I have the 91 team as my first team on my list that did not win a national championship, and I could not bring myself to put anybody that didn't win a national championship in the top 10. But I do have UNLV 91, the team that did not win a championship, ranked at number 11. Thoughts, Dave?
They were good. I had the 90 team at 22 in my rankings.
I said thoughts, Dave, not thoughts, Gary.
Oh.
Go, Dave.
Well, Josh, I've got a lot to say about this.
I know you do. I
mean, there has not been many teams in my lifetime that have changed the way I feel about college basketball. The Michigan team, the Fab Five, kind of really changed a lot of things, and they haven't been mentioned anywhere in our conversation since we've been here on vacation. But this team right here really changed the way I think college basketball was played. How many? And I'm asking you guys, putting you on the spot. So how many of these guys were JUCO transfers? I know Johnson and Augman were.
I didn't know Augman was.
Augman was, I think, and I think one of the other two guards was either
Anderson Hunt.
Wasn't Hunt?
Hunt, or
I think it was Hunt.
or Anthony.
So Hunt is the forgotten man in that.
He is, and
he
was one of the greatest shooters. I mean,
I want to say
incredible.
in '90 he was the MOP of the Final Four.
I mean, he could shoot, and he was small, man. He was like,
But he was athletic. I mean, he'd go and hammer it 2 hands, too.
He could. But this team was so much fun to watch, and they just changed the way kind of our generation watched basketball, I think. I mean, I love watching them, and they were dominant.
I think that 90 team was the first team to score 100 points in an NCAA game.
Well, yeah, that team gets pubbed because of the blowout of Duke.
Right. They
beat them by like 30, right?
30, yeah. 103-73 in Denver in 90. But if you look at overall records in the team, they basically, like we were looking before the pod, they basically brought back the same team, and those dudes were a year older.
Yep.
And LJ and Augman were back, and Anthony was back, and Hunt was back. And they just blew people out. In that 90 run, they had some tight games. Ball State gave them a run.
Yeah.
Loyola Marymount gave them a run. But people think of that team as this legendary, untouchable team because they blend 91 and 90 together, and they associate them with that blowout of Duke in the national championship game. So I didn't even have 90 ranked. I had 91 at 11.
And they should have won back-to-back, obviously.
Yeah.
And Larry Johnson, he doesn't become a throwaway player in the NBA. You know, the Knicks, he was a bruiser. With Charlotte, he was good, but he had morning. But on those two UNLV teams, he was completely unstoppable. Nobody could guard him down low. Unstoppable.
Then they had the plastic
and he was only
man.
about 6'8", 6'9". I don't know.
Yeah. He caught a lot of flack for not wanting to shoot at the end of that Duke game in the Final Four, too,
you're
if
right.
you remember.
Yep.
And they had Tark.
They had
Tark.
Who doesn't love Tark?
Tark was the man.
They had a really balanced team in 90, though, too. Just going back and looking at my notes, there were a number of games where all 5 of their starters were in double figures.
Yeah.
I mean, they could flat shoot and play, and they were just really a good team, too. But I think the 91 team was better.
Well, talking about Tark, I think when he passed, there was only 2 or 3 people ever that passed away where they dimmed the lights on the Vegas Strip.
Yeah.
It was Sinatra.
Yeah.
And it was Tark, and I don't even know if there was a third one.
Tark is the man.
It's just unbelievable.
And
Our legend that he is.
And surprisingly, he and Knight were good friends.
That's not surprising.
Which kind of surprised
That's
me.
not surprising.
Yeah, they're both
because there were a
brilliant.
lot of people that were talking about how Tark cheated so much, and you know how Knight felt about what he thought were cheaters.
Can't cheat the amoeba defense, though.
He
That was nasty,
amoeba.
man. That was nasty.
Yeah, I like to just yell amoeba at Knox's games just to see if the other coaches know basketball history, because if they do those shit their pants if they think we put in the amoeba defense. But then all the kids just look at me like, what the hell is amoeba? What is he talking about? Let's stick with teams that didn't win, because I had quite a few on my list, and as I was going through them with Dad before we started the pod, he couldn't believe that I had some of them in my top 50. But I had Georgetown 85.
I
had 85. I didn't have 84. So another UNLV situation where I did not put the national champion 84 team in, but I did put the 85 team in. They got beat by Villanova because I thought that was a better team.
Dave mentioned Fab 5 Michigan.
Fab 5 Michigan. I was just going to go down the list because I also had 83 Pi Slamma Jamma Houston ranked in my next group. At 16, and they didn't win a national championship, and I did 83. Some of your trivia over there, go ahead and hit us with the trivia on Hakeem.
Hakeem Olajuwon, the only player to play in 3 national championship games and not get a win.
Yeah, that's wild.
I had no idea.
Yeah, that's wild. So this is the team that was near and dear to my heart. This team I love, the 99 Duke team. Went 37 going into the national championship against UConn with Rip Hamilton and Khalid Elamine.
They were good.
Kevin Freeman. Ricky Moore, those guys. But that Duke team was fucking loaded. They had Elton Brand, William Avery, Corey Maggette came off the bench.
Right.
Trajan Langdon. I mean, they were awesome.
That
and
99,
they got beat. But the thing that's crazy is that 99 UConn team does not get near the credit that they deserve.
They do from me. I had them ranked 18th.
So I had
18th.
Duke 99 at 21, and I had UConn 99 at 17. So yeah, that Rip Hamilton team was nasty.
Yeah.
Now, they squeaked out a couple in the tournament though.
Yeah. But Dave talked about a team, playing team ball. That UConn 99. Those guys knew what they were doing too.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
And I always thought that Ricky Moore, son and William Avery, because if I remember right, they went to the same high school, but Ricky Moore was older, and Ricky Moore used to whip his ass in practice. And so they matched up William Avery. They matched up Ricky Moore with William Avery, and it was just like he just big brothered him. And I thought that cut the head off the snake for Duke. But I had the Fab Five. Speaking of the Fab Five, and then we can wrap stuff up. But I had Fab Five at 29. So if you take the Weber timeout out of it, and let's say hypothetically say they win without the Weber timeout, they make a play and they win. They beat Carolina in 93, who I had ranked a couple spots ahead of them.
Well, I think people playing ball in the 90s, that team was a historic team.
Cultural. It was a cultural revolution.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, it was just a total different way of playing. The black socks, the pants hanging down to their knees. Their cheer before every game was something about grab them by the nuts or let your nuts hang low or something like that.
I don't know. Do you guys? Did they win the Big Ten that year?
No.
I mean, yeah,
IU beat them twice.
Yeah.
That 93 IU team was phenomenal.
And nobody remembers that team.
Nobody.
Everybody in the world remembers that Michigan
because
team.
it was a cultural revolution
Yep.
on the hardwood, period.
Yep.
Right.
And they probably got bumped up points for me on my list because there was nothing like the Fab Five. Now,
they were good.
I would say that there was a build-up to the Fab Five. So you had your Georgetowns in the 80s.
And you had your running Rebels.
And you had your
Rebels,
UNLV team.
Right.
And then Michigan came and were just the natural progression of it. But then it happened when hip-hop was exploding.
Right.
It happened with a bit of a technology revolution. All the suburban white kids were listening to rap, and everything just fit so seamlessly.
They were so different. Plus, they played in the Big Ten where UNLV was out west. But they were so different in their makeup and so different in everything they did. And they were on television all the freaking time, too.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, the only two pieces of non-Indiana University apparel I had by the time I went to college was a Jalen Rose gold Fab 5 jersey and a Larry Johnson number 4 jersey. Only two pieces of
I still like
Indiana.
Jalen Rose.
I mean,
I still
those
think
are
he's
the
a
two
great
I had.
commentator.
They changed everything for our generation.
And we couldn't be alone in that either. I mean, that's the impact that they had. So, yeah, it's wild. It's funny to think about. If they're getting to Southern Indiana and Northern Indiana, like they're getting everywhere. And anyways, all right, we'll wrap it up. The kids are back from the pool, as you can probably hear, and our wives are screaming while they're talking about ice cream over there. But I appreciate you guys coming on and doing this. And, Dad, I appreciate you for putting together
I loved it. I enjoyed it thoroughly.
And we hope that by this time that you guys hear this, that the Slam Top 50 is out, that you can pick up at 99.com or slamgoods.com.
Right. And if you want better rankings, you can write me.
He will write you back. Stamped envelope,
yes,
and he'll send it back.
With printed. It will be a printed reply.
But no, anyways, this was a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys sitting down to do it.
It was fun.
Great times. Thank you, boys.
Thank you for listening to the 99 podcast with HVS, the High Volume Shooters. For more information, check out the blog at 99.com under HVS. And while you're there, do yourself a favor and pick up some retro college shorts. Till next time.